What's up, YouTube scientists? Looks like we're online. So I'm streaming at a different time today, and the reason for that is I heard that doing it around this time would be better, especially for international audiences. So as an American-centric talker right now, that would mean Asia and Europe. And then I also heard that just generally for Americans too, initially I was actually trying to avoid certain what you would call work hours in America. But then I heard some interesting tips that it's actually during work hours where you'll get the most people tuning into a stream. And the reason for that being that a lot of people are working office type jobs and they are allowed to hang out and listen to and watch stuff on their computers at their jobs. So actually, let's look at Eastern Standard Time. Okay, so right now it's about Eastern Standard Time, 11:31 a.m. So let's take a look. Cool. So initially I was doing the streams a little bit later, so that maybe as people got off work and stuff that they might want to stop by and check out the stream. But thanks to the feedback of you all, I got the pro tip. Yeah, and I've seen this as well. Maybe someone's working at a convenience store, they're just hanging out, and maybe you actually get the biggest customer rushes during right after work. So let's ask some questions, issues for us all to discuss. So let's call it service industries. When are the peak times for traffic? And actually Google might be a good resource to study this. I know I've looked at businesses and stuff on Google, and then they'll have the chart that's talking about when people are going to stuff. And I'll add, at your workplace, are you allowed to view content, listen to podcasts, listen to music, etc.? And I'm getting the impression that the answer to this question for a lot of people is yes. I know, for example, working in academic type places, as a student, you're pretty free to do what you like. That was one of the reasons why I actually wanted to and enjoyed being in academia is while you're on your own time working on projects and stuff, you do have relative freedom about how you structure your time and do things. Now, of course, that could be a double-edged sword. For a lot of people, it could mean, oh no, I don't get anything done. But for many other people, that is the best thing ever because it means that you more easily could travel, visit people, and so on and so forth. Okay, so I'll jump into today's topic. I was looking at some YouTube last night, and I came across this video of a famous wealthy man showing his new promotional thing about how to help kids do better at math. So I'm turning off the audio for copyright, etc., reasons, but I'll just narrate. So this person has this company called Mastery. This educator has a company called Lern, and they're talking about how they're going to change teaching using technology. So students who don't complete algebra, so you got this frustrated youth with a whiteboard trying to solve some equations. So what's the solution? Then you have all these kids lined up with computers at their tables, and let's just make a couple notes. Do you see any pen and paper anywhere? No, it's a primarily digital based type computer learning that we have going on here. Though they are doing some kind of collaboration. You saw the students pointing at each other's screens. They're pecking away at their keyboards, entering their buttons. All right, we got some diversity here. A young lady wearing a hijab, and then saying Black, Latino, English learners are experiencing poverty, especially. Might have trouble with the mathematics, because maybe this is implying that if their teacher is like a white lady, that they cannot connect or understand her instruction with math. Here's a teacher, likewise. He's walking around holding his laptop, so maybe he has a teacher interface, or he's using the student interface so he could show students what they're doing on their machines. All right, then an advertisement for that Lern program. Okay, Lern is a learning platform. Let's actually take some notes on this as we go, because there's a lot packed in here. So we have learning platform, and we'll take a look at what some of these terms mean. Okay, so the platform, like Lern, is supposed to the platform is supposed to teach kids math. Teaches kids math. Okay. Making math culturally relevant and friendly. All right. Then we have another diversity shot. So these are probably educators, because they all look like adults, older people. We've got some non-natural hair colors, some quirky fashion styles, but everybody looking very smiley and positive. Okay, then they're talking about learning as developing, they say, algebraic thinking. So this is defining learning defined through being able to use certain cognitive patterns, something like that. We'll look at that later. Okay, what can we do to support all kids to get to and through algebra? All right, so the Lern, what did they do? They use pictures and concrete context. Now this is funny because it's concrete context, right? But you're looking at a screen the whole time. We'll get into that more. All right. So then this other company, this Mastery, they're an app. Mastery app. Okay, science fiction. So we have this whole, it's about telling stories with this fantastic sci-fi story. All right. In this story, we are going to deal with some whale migration patterns. Okay, so likely the story is going to involve some kind of ecology type topics. Let's take a look. Students are going to understand that mathematics can help solve very important problems in their lives. All right, and then this person's a Rhode Island educator talking about students that are left behind which probably means by a bunch of metrics they aren't doing so well. Oops, I hit a button and skipped. Let's go back. Okay, want students to understand the value of algebra. So they come up with all these programs such as Algebra Readiness. You want to have exposure so they're not seeing stuff for the first time. Saying, okay, if we put in the investments, we will see the academic gains change. Put in the investments, see the academic gains change. And if they do well in algebra, they're going to do well the rest of their educational career. Do well in algebra, do well the rest of their educational career. Alright. Okay, and that was by this man not so long ago. And of course, you can't see the dislikes and the comments are turned off. 1K up, 703K views. So make what you want of that. I haven't downloaded any browser extensions to alter the view I have. But let's just talk about some of this stuff here. So let me just preface by saying I think it's good to learn algebra for most people. There's this old saying about, let's say, the reading, the writing, and the arithmetic, or the arithmetic. So the so-called, the 3 R's. And this is like, what are the basic things that you should learn in education? And those are among them, basic education. In the classical world, there was called the Trivium, and this is where we get the English word trivia from. But trivia does not mean dumb stuff like fun movie quotes or whatever. Trivium is some big brain stuff that actually maybe a lot of people nowadays are not so good at. So let's actually really quick, let's look up what the Trivium was. Okay, so we're going to Britannica.com. So the Trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric. So we'll just list that. Grammar, logic, rhetoric. And a lot of mathematics, I think now in modern contexts, what we call math now could fall under logic. And there will be some big brain, number theories and stuff, reasons why that is. But I think we'll agree that, math, one of the things that makes it difficult is that you have a rigorous methodology where you could say that something is correct or not correct. The same thing goes with grammar. You could talk about how certain sentences are well-formed or not well-formed. And especially if you're studying a second language, then to memorize all these new forms, to do analysis and stuff, it could be quite hard. And then you could talk about rhetoric as a kind of application of both grammar and logic. So if you're sloppy in your speech, like we are sometimes on Alan's stream, then maybe your rhetoric will not be super convincing because your grammar will be off. And if you slip up and you're sloppy in your logic, then what you're trying to say might collapse. So let's actually do a more refined search. Trivium education. Okay, here's a Wikipedia. So this was considered the lower division. And okay, so let's just look at this description really quick. Grammar teaches the mechanics of language to the student. This is a step where the student comes to terms, defining the objects and information perceived by the five senses. Hence the law of identity, a tree is a tree and not a cat. So here you could learn, oh yeah, we use, not to negate a cat. A means we don't know like which cat. It's indefinite article. So if you go and you study grammar these days, you could still learn all these things. But a lot of people, they could speak, they could use English, whatever their language is. But if they were asked to speak about the grammar, they don't have the terms to do it. You need to kind of formally study grammar a little bit in order to do that. Okay, logic, also dialectic, is the mechanics of thought and analysis, the process of composing sound arguments, identifying fallacious arguments and statements, and so systematically removing contradictions, thereby producing factual knowledge that can be trusted. So here, this is interesting. The grammar has to do also with being able to create accurate descriptive statements about what you actually see, what you actually hear. So if you had to give a first-hand account of something, could you do it in a precise manner? Then grammar would be quite important to do that. And then logic, from these statements, descriptive sentences, declarative sentences, can you create sound arguments? So of course, if people are sloppy in grammar, you just make sentences that are fuzzy, nondescript, no good. Then with the logic, the statements you're starting with are not a solid basis from which to reason from, at least by certain, probably more, you would call it analytic methods of doing argument stuff, right? But you could see like you're doing some sort of engineering, some sort of mechanical work. It would obviously be very important to be precise about what you're talking about. If you're just like, hey, yeah, well, just give me the thingy to do the thing, that's not going to be very helpful. For example, if a new person comes and works in your auto shop, if the person, instead, you could show them the tools, tell them what it's called, then you could more effectively ask people to do things and also train up new people faster, which one might say is one of the key important things about education, is being able to integrate new people into new working environments and stuff quickly and get them up to speed so that you could get more done together. All right, and then finally here, rhetoric is the application of language in order to instruct and persuade the listener and the reader. It is the knowledge, grammar now understood, logic, and being transmitted outwards as wisdom. Rhetoric. So rhetoric is going to rely on understanding of both grammar and logic, and then you could use rhetoric in order to pursue wisdom. Now, I just want to pause here for a moment to say that where do feelings come into this? I don't know what other way to put this. Logic, grammar, a lot of times these topics will feel cold, maybe strict to people because they impose order, for example, on the way that you speak, on the way that you construct arguments and the way that you present those arguments. That could be contrasted with these emotional, feelings-based approaches to things. So oftentimes, rhetoric, people might be thinking of something like sophistry. So the use of fallacious arguments, especially with the intention of deceiving. So this is very, very common, especially with like videos, sound, images, things like this. You don't have a good idea about whether something is true or not, whether the logic is sound. The videography, the way that sights and sounds are presented, is supposed to be doing the argument itself. So it's like, oh, I feel good about this thing, therefore it must be good. So let's actually just pop on the sound and watch like a couple seconds of this video and see what kind of new rhetoric it has going.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I do remember taking algebra, but ask me what I learned, that's a different conversation.
It was common to think that you are either born with a mathematical talent or you are not.
So just seeing what was said here, then they're basically saying that their education, they didn't learn much. It kind of sucked.
Algebra is just a series of random rules to memorize.
All right, now kind of constructing maybe they were taught this way, I don't know, but if you were truly taught math as like a bunch of random rules to memorize with no reason except to pass a test, then clearly why would people think that's boring? I mean, because there's no reason for it. It's random.
One after another. They're boring, they're tedious, they're torture.
Algebra is one of the most important indicators of students' future success. Students who don't complete Algebra 1 have just a...
Okay, so let's flip back to the thing on the Trivium really quick. So a lot of the times when people are making promotional videos and stuff, you're going to do the videography, you're going to do the sound and stuff in order to create in people a bypassing of grammar and logic in order to just, the argument is basically the feelings, that's how you get a grip on people. And this will go along with, we've looked at Marshall McLuhan, the medium is the message. And what does this mean? Well, through like a promotional type video and stuff, right, you could break it up and look at how they constructed this video. The first thing is modern education sucks, or in the past, recent past, education sucks. Then, okay, here's a new solution, and then you get these electronic drum beats and stuff, so saying like, oh yeah, this is kind of futuristic.
1 in 5 chance of graduating from...
This is kind of new, and then also too starting to say lots of statistics, and the statistics here, this is also important. If we look at grammar and logic, because oftentimes all these figures are reported like 1 in 5. Now, saying numbers will give people feelings. People will hear it's like, oh, that seems like a big number. That seems like a small number. So saying numbers is actually a very good way to get people emotionally activated. Now, oftentimes what would be an important question is to like look at how are people counting? What are the things that people are counting, and to get into those sorts of details to see what is the thing someone's trying to explain and if the statistical methods are sound or not. But one big rhetorical or form of sophistry that we see today is that people will just present numbers and then emotional music, stuff like that, and then that will take the place of having some kind of actual sound argument or taking the time to explain how something works transparently. Instead, it's saying, oh, we have numbers, therefore we're experts. You know, we've been studying this problem for a long time. You should believe us because we have numbers. And then couple that with music, and then implying, using other trickery that if you don't support them, you're kind of anti-math or anti-education, something like that. Then that is the means by which a lot of stuff goes forward, like weird techno-Borg education. All right. So let us look. We were looking at Trivium, and we'll just quickly look at, okay, Quadrivium. Quadrivium, what is that? And this would be after the Trivium. So here, taught after the Trivium with the classical education, and we'll just say what that includes. And that would be arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. Oh, that's interesting too, because then this astronomy as well when was the quadrivium around? So we're going all the way back to Plato's Republic. So the nature of the quadrivium too would probably not be our current cosmological model, but the shared cosmology of much of the old world. And then here's a woman teaching geometry, and everyone is gathered around a table, and we have some interesting shapes. So why is this interesting? Well, so the quadrivium, to study subjects like arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, it's going to rely on having an understanding of grammar, logic, and rhetoric. You need grammar to be able to precisely speak about all the different things that you're reasoning about. You're going to need logic to say whether some line of reasoning is valid or not. And then, of course, you're going to need rhetoric to tie those things together. And so once you have this solid base of the trivium, then you could go in and, for example, you could use arithmetic to reason about, such and such bales of hay here, do practical calculations regarding commerce, personal finance, geometry would be important for doing like buildings, construction. So like the square, these various building tools, how to cut tiles and stuff to fit them together. Geometry is useful for all of that. In fact, even I was able to briefly do, I think they call them constructions. So here, let's visit this classic site. Math is fun. But geometric constructions, it's like teaching you how to make particular forms. Like, how do you draw a perfect hexagon? If you know how to do the construction, so just using a compass and a straight edge, then you could construct a perfect hexagon. And know that the compass like this could be really simple. Like if you literally just had a pencil and then a string, and then you're really careful, then you could do that. You could make a perfect circle if you're careful. And then, of course, a straight edge, just like a ruler or something. So using a very small toolbox of very simple tools, you could learn how to construct like a perfect hexagon, which might be something you need to do to like cut tiles or something, cut stones, all sorts of practical reasons with respect to like actual construction in the world, by which knowledge like this could be valuable. And even in our current times, with all the technology we have, a lot of people will study and learn about these things just because it's naturally engaging, naturally fascinating to be able to make these. I'll actually give I'll prove this all to you with some commercial products. So if I search, let's say I'm going to search geometric coloring book, bunch of stuff's probably going to come up. Yeah, so look here just with these image previews. So people are naturally drawn towards all these things. You don't have to tell people, oh yeah, I'm going to make math interesting for you. People like stuff like this, and if they know how to draw them, how to do it, you don't have to tell somebody to sit there and concentrate for hours to do these things. People will naturally be drawn towards wanting to understand how to make all of these sorts of patterns, because for lack of a better word, they look cool. So how do you construct and do all those things? And of course, as I was giving the examples with the actual construction and the actual building, if people are, I don't know, helping remodel their house or something, to know how the various things that they're using fit together, You might have something like this in your shower that you look at, and it's like, oh yeah, now I know how to do that pattern and stuff that's in my shower. So very cool. Let's give out a quick shout out to our friend Ksali. Maybe he's popping in and watching this, but one reason a lot of people stumble upon his stuff, for example, is he does a lot of this mathematical geometry type stuff using programming, so you could see various geometric forms. So this is his blog topic list. Okay, but you can see, like, with these preview images, the things that will get people intrigued with math, and what captured Ksali's interest is a lot of these geometric, fractal looking, how do these things fit together? And then if you understand how they fit together, you could likewise understand how to generate the patterns. Just like you could just keep a tiling pattern going on forever. In the same way, you could simulate that using digital technology. And so people look at stuff like this, and I think naturally they're very interested. They want to know the science. How is it that this thing is put together? How is it that it's constructed? And then if you actually did it, whether it's with toothpicks, drawing pencil and paper, or programming it on a computer, because there's a beauty to this sort of thing, then people are naturally drawn into it. So geometry there, then you're going to probably need some arithmetic and stuff to measure some edges and stuff, perhaps. And then these last two things in the quadrium are interesting: music and astronomy. Music and astronomy, I've heard one description of music as I think it was like pure pattern. It's an interesting way to put it. Like one common thing, even I haven't studied that much music, hardly any formally, but one thing you'll see a lot in music is a theme and variation of various sorts. So let's just pop and look at Music Theory Academy. What is this? Theme and variation is a very common musical structure you'll come across, especially in classical music. The structure is built upon a musical idea called the theme, which is played at the start of the piece. The theme can be as short as 8 bars in length and can be much longer. It usually consists of a memorable melody with an accompaniment of some sort. Once the theme has been played, the composer then repeats it but varies it in some way. This is called variation 1. Once variation 1 has been played, the composer repeats the same theme again, this time varying it in a different way, thus producing variation 2. The process is repeated as many times as the composer chooses, producing a musical structure called theme and variation. So probably after this, I'll go listen to some music with theme and variation. That sounds nice. But that's, yes, with education. So geometric, this is kind of the visual spatial patterns you could explore and learn more about. Then in the musical world as well, looking at various ways in which music is done, such as the mechanics of scales, things like that. And then also the bigger compositional structures, like learning writing or rhetoric. You might learn about how to compose a paragraph. Then likewise with music, you could learn how to compose like a theme, and how to compose variation, so on. And then astronomy too. I think that the application of geometry to astronomy is it's not difficult to see how those would relate. But yeah, so building on your foundation of the trivium, then you could get to study the bigger, what you could call more applied arts. But being able to do these things relies on having good understanding of grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And then once you do that, once you know how to like draw your circles and do all sorts of stuff, then lo and behold, you could try to model the cosmos. And much of the world in the past all came to similar models about the shape of the cosmos. Often you could see with the mountain of some kind in the center, a lot of circular action. So very interesting stuff. Let us return to this video and our notes. So, okay. So education in the past, we could look at what are the sorts of things people were learning and what was the purpose of those subjects, and how is it like the Trivium, you apply it and then you could learn about, study the world and apply it in crafts like carpentry, masonry, and so on and so forth. Now, what are we doing now with education? Like in this video, they're creating a learning platform. Okay, so let's talk about this word platform really quick. Something like Facebook, social media, we call them social media platforms. What is the reason for that? Well, you access the platform and you could do stuff on the platform, but it's not your platform. The platform belongs to Facebook and whoever owns Facebook. So one thing that we're seeing with education these days is as you bring learning to a platform, it's not like, oh, I learned something useful in my textbook. I could actually look up that useful information like my teacher showed me. Or like, for example, I'm playing music. It's like, oh yeah, there's that one passage. I forgot how it went. Then I know how to like look it up in a music book. But one of the annoying things about all this digital stuff is that you don't actually own, or you might be restricted from access to all these materials that were a part of your education. So, for example, we were talking about constructions with geometry. What if you wanted to recall how to, make a hexagon or something? Because now you're actually going to want to help your mother-in-law make some nice pattern to go over the kitchen sink. But then you don't have access to that anymore. So the nature of the platform is it's not your materials, not something being given to you. Rather, you're accessing a system and learning how to be plugged into the system. Okay, Reaper says very few people were taught. Not sure if you said that yet. Very few people could read. Okay, so Reaper brings up the point that in the past, one difference between education in the past and now is that now we have pretty much everyone attending schools and stuff like that. But in the past, education was often reserved for smaller, wealthier families. Maybe not even necessarily wealthy, but not everyone did education. A lot of people couldn't read. And I think like if you were doing a lot of crafts, for example, were there probably tons of, say, carpenters that couldn't read? I think that would be quite common, right? You're just able to do your work. You could make your living, but you wouldn't necessarily know how to read. Though maybe a lot of people could read stuff, like their store would have a name. They would recognize their family crest, like all sorts of different things that we might not regard as reading so much. And actually, this is an interesting topic to get into later. Logos, reading, symbols, family crests, a whole nother rabbit hole that we might enjoy going down later. Okay, Reaper says, very students own their books in K through 12 education. They had to return them at the end of the year, so no one has the materials in the old system. Yeah, so within the past, I don't know, 30, 40 years or so, I think, yes, Reaper, I've had the same experience here too, where I would, yes, you would borrow the textbooks, you would use the textbooks to learn. Now, on a certain level, this is all kind of absurd, because if this was valuable information that you're supposed to retain, I mean, to print and produce a paperback book, for instance, it's not very expensive. And I'll actually bring up a little education tidbit. So I'm glad Reaper brought this up, and this is why it's good to hear different people say stuff. Could contrast learning around the world. One thing that's very common in East Asia, for instance, is that people will have cheaply, readily available, what would you call it? Textbooks. So it's normal for everybody to buy their textbooks. I'll go pull up a couple examples. All right. So these books are for English learners, but they are actually like Asian style books for learning Japanese. And as you can see, it's a paperback book. These books are quite affordable and inexpensive. It won't cost more than a meal. So it's not totally out of the reach of anybody to reasonably buy. But then it's like, if you studied at a school and you found a book reasonable, then you could return and refresh what you learned. And yeah, you could have high quality, good learning materials available to you. So in East Asia, for example, they've long had a model where people will buy their books, but in general, the books will be much more affordable, whereas in the United States, textbooks are infamously expensive. Okay, Reaper says, carpenters in much of the past would have had a guild that apprenticed them and acted like a monopoly gatekeeper. Today, doctors, lawyers, and real engineers get this treatment. Yeah, Reaper too. This is a good point, and Reaper also brings up workbooks in the USA, similar to textbooks in Asia. So in Asia, let's see, lots of paperback, inexpensive textbooks. So we could just talk about, for the raw project of just conveying useful information to people, all the tools and the resources to do it are out there. So if we really wanted to just expand learning and stuff, then, there are tons of ways to do it. And I'll just bring up this note here too, just to say that I am also not just anti-technology here. I learned how to do tons and tons of stuff like just online on the internet. So I'm not saying like computers bad, don't teach people through computers. What we're discussing here is like, okay, we want education. Let's all agree with this goal that we want education to be better. So if we want education to be better, then we want to understand the best use cases for all these different tools, such that like if I have to teach myself something, or I have to teach my kid something, or you have to teach me something, right? We want to know what the best tools are, and if they're freely or cheaply available, then all the better. You don't want to spend more money than you have to on something, though if it is worth it to invest more in order to make some learning succeed, like we'll just give the example here. If buying these kids just some paper to aid in their learning was useful, then who would be against buying their kid a stack of paper or some notebooks in order to do a better job learning? That would definitely make sense to me. Okay, Reaper says, yeah, if you want to talk about the real tragedy in education, it really isn't someone offering free laptops to kids. It's a textbook companies on purpose charging the book each year to kill the used textbook market. Yes. So Reaper, beyond this, I would say that I highlighted this word too, the learning platform, to say that this is the sort of evolution of the controlled textbook system. So not only do you control textbooks and have students buy new textbooks and only make your little changes and charge an arm and a leg for textbooks, now the learning platform is basically making textbooks a subscription service that's now digital. So I'm just going to search like learning platform. Let's see what comes up. Tovuti. Learning platforms. Learn platform. Okay, so the buzzword we're looking for is edtech. Coursera. So we could just look at a handful of these. The Zenfully simple way to do all these things. Okay, so this site has to do with creating courses to sell. So this is the Meta. They probably have a course on creating courses. So big opportunities there. Then Coursera, I think this is a pretty famous one, collaborating with some really big names. All right. And then more learning platforms, LinkedIn Learning, Coursera, Khan Academy, Skillshare, Udemy. So I think it's pretty clear to see how tons and tons more digital stuff is becoming the norm for lots of education. And I think that, we don't have to block or say no to any digital, but as people making choices about our own education and education for people around us too, to also understand the nature of these digital systems and how a lot of it is very like disempowering, in the sense that it's like puts you through like a program, and then what are you left with at the end? Was it a good use of your time, energy, and money? That's the big question. Okay, Reaper says the best tools. It used to take an hour to figure out how to cook something from a blog. Then it took 10 minutes from YouTube. Now it takes 1 minute watching TikTok. He says, I used to lug 6 heavy books around in school. If I could get them digital, that would be great. Yeah, so digital certainly has its uses. We're not hating on digital, but let's just say, a lot of this you could make your decision also based on time. So there's nothing wrong with we'll just look at this cooking example, right? So if you just have a bunch of cookbooks in your kitchen, and then you're like, oh yeah, I want to cook Italian today, here's the Italian cookbook, and then you flip through it, and then you might say, oh, I wasn't thinking of cooking this, but that actually seems like a good idea. You might also be thinking like, oh yeah, I don't want to go on TikTok now. I just want to spend time with the people I have in the kitchen. So to have options, I think, is one of the nice parts about our century. But I think that there is a real danger to making sort of default going through platforms as the default way for people to engage with a lot of stuff. So a lot of this is presented as just kind of an inevitability, like, oh yeah, this is the future. This is how we do learning now. Look at our high-tech learning and so on and so forth. But you could ask yourself, do you think that these new ways of doing it are real? Is it a real improvement? Is this sort of way better? Or are you getting a much more restricted, more torturous path in order to get some sort of knowledge that you could get in some other ways? So personally, I think that, math class and stuff for a long time, as the teachers were saying at the beginning of this video, they didn't like to go to math class. So I thought math class was boring and stuff in a lot of ways. That's one of the reasons I started to learn how to draw, because I was just hanging out and drawing pictures and stuff in the margins of my papers, learning how to do other things, thinking about other stuff during class. So I'm not launching a polemic defending, oh, the traditional classroom is good. By no means. But what I am saying is these new systems, these new ways that people are presenting to do stuff, I personally do not view them as progress. I do not view them as making things better. And that's that. Okay, Reaper's making assumptions about me. He says, you don't cook or read cookbooks. Cookbooks are known for anti-common, pretentious, elaborate recipes that are impossible to replicate. A 5-minute YouTube video. Well, that's why you have to know how to use a cookbook, dude. Like, yes, it's true. Recipes, oftentimes, they have all sorts of fancy stuff. But then you gain some experience using a cookbook. Then you're like, oh, yeah, I know that I could leave out this. Or, yeah, they call for this and this spice, but I know that if I swap it for this spice, it'll taste just as good, if not better. So, Reaper, I'm not saying, like, oh, yeah, cookbooks are great. You got to follow every ingredient, every step just exactly as it's shown. Cookbook could give you a very good general idea for how to do something, and then you could build off the knowledge you have and also the various ingredients that you have available. And doing that, right, then you could cook something good. But yeah, of course, 5-minute YouTube and stuff, learning things from videos is really great, like how to chop vegetables in this way, how to whip an egg in that way. Oftentimes there's no substitute for just watching how it's done. So, cookbook's not going to give you a video, but to see a video of something's done, say like, oh yeah, I could see how brown the meat looks there or something, to have that sort of rich information to see how stuff is done, then I think that could be really useful. Okay, Reaper says, I think you should use your cross-cultural knowledge to talk about the root of the problem with this video. America has some kind of weird problem with math that other cultures don't. In this sense, technology is just yet another method thrown at this problem that is actually cultural, where we could point and show other cultures that don't bemoan math this way. I think the places I grew up in, there was no stigma or anti-math thing. I grew up near the University of California, Irvine. So from day one that I've been, around math tutoring centers and all this stuff, tons of, East Asians, Indian people, Jewish people, all sorts of people that are pro-math in many ways. So I'm speaking from a person that's coming from having gone to very good schools. What I'm saying is I've gone to good schools, and then I've also taught myself a bunch of stuff. So the opinions and views that I have are informed by saying, okay, what has worked from my own experience? What hasn't worked? How do I compare like alternative learning or teaching methods I've learned from the official channels through school? That is the sort of experience and perspective that I am speaking from. And we could really quick, let's see, Rockefeller quote education. If we want to talk about cultural underpinnings for why are there problems in the United States, well, I think we could look at some influential people in the United States and the systems that we have in place, and how those systems took form. So here we have a red-headed mom, and she's saying our schools are never going to be fixed because they've been doing what they were intended to from the beginning. And we have a quote from John D. Rockefeller, a philanthropist, so similar to this man here, a self-branded philanthropist, and one of the masterminds behind compulsory schooling. He said, I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers. Or this quote by John T. Gates, maybe he's related, advisor to John Rockefeller and founder of Rockefeller Foundation, Rockefeller University, General Education Board. Quote, We shall not try to make these people or any of their children into philosophers or men of learning or of science. We are not to raise up among them authors, orators, poets, or men of letters. We shall not search for embryo, great, maybe typo there, great artists, painters, musicians, nor will we cherish even the humbler ambition to raise up from among them lawyers, doctors, preachers, statesmen, of whom we now have ample supply. So I have not audited and checked out Shelley Sangri and what she has to say. But this is to say, if you do investigate the history of areas such as public education in the United States, and you want to see some of the reasons why we have the problems that we do in the United States, well, look no further than the architects of much of the structure that we have in America, and I think that you will learn quite a lot. Okay, Reaper says, so as a pro-math person that went to good California schools, what are your thoughts on the new California push to get algebra out of middle school and lower math achievement in general? Influential people are not responsible for parents valuing football over math. Look at my school's football program, which is often funded with private money to understand this. Reaper says, you are quoting robber barons from the 19th century. Yeah, so Reaper, I'll just give my general opinion view on this. I would say that, okay, so as I've said here, I don't think that there's anything wrong with, teaching algebra and math, so I'm not anti-math. I think one thing that is important is don't make like public schooling, official schooling, more than it has to be. Don't make it too overbearing. So, for example, if you did want to get rid of requirements for math beyond, let's see what you said, get algebra out of middle school and lower math achievement in general, it would be better to have less math education and for it to be really solid. And then, you could even shorten school hours, whatever, make school more affordable, make school more cheap. I think that school continues to grow. Education in school continues to grow and grow, to become longer and longer, to take up more aspects of life. And we could see this in recent times with the expansion of kindergarten, pre-K, and stuff like that. And I think that it's no surprise that stuff like homeschooling has continued to grow, because school has become much, much more of this totalitarian thing. It's not so much now like, oh yeah, I just drop my kids off at school, and then like our family, we do all these other things. As school grows and grows to take up more time, resources, and puts itself in charge of more and more aspects of telling people how to think correctly, not just provide some basic good skills that could be useful for everybody, then yeah, maybe in general just a contraction of school hours. But like to make school like dumber and then keep it at the same length that it is, then what will come and fill the void? So to make it less void, I guess is what I'm saying, would be the good thing. Don't try to keep all the same hours and then just make it like dumber. Lack of hours is not so much the problem as issues with organization and other stuff. So I would say that it's futile, for example, to try to teach someone more advanced mathematics if they don't have good fundamentals. So insofar as like a lot of the schooling that we have is trying to build on a non-existent foundation, you could say that doing that is a waste of time in many cases. Okay. Reaper says, meanwhile, Andrew Carnegie created and funded public libraries all over America, and BG has funded free computer labs in those libraries. School hours grow because of two earner incomes. It's daycare for parents, and that is why it lasts longer from the day, and also why there is much more public offerings of kindergarten and preschool. But I agree there are way too many hours of schooling. So Reaper, I will agree with you descriptively about, yes, that is what is happening. School is becoming a more and more embracing thing. And then you get the billionaire philanthropist type people also offering, well, let's use this word. They're offering their platforms, whether in the past more books and libraries, or whether now, Coursera, that sort of stuff. So you get the people that are in charge of the education offering a lot of platforms and things for free in order for people to further dig down and integrate in the system. Now, for all of us thinking about the future, ourselves, our families, and so on and so forth, you could ask the question, what direction do I want to see, me and my people go into? Would I wish that, a young kid that I know, that he is more and more integrated into the, Carnegie matrix? Or would I rather see this person as a more independent, free agent that is not so tightly bound to the current institutions? So that is what I have to say to that. Reaper says, California is saying that smart math kids can't learn algebra early. Why hold them back? No one's holding them back. They could go and learn in other places. East Asian people, especially, and South Asian, a lot of Indian people. This is why there's so much tutoring and this sort of stuff. And also people that go out and, like me, I taught myself a bunch of computer programming stuff. There's tons of people that do similar things. So I think that it's incorrect to say schools don't hold people back from learning, in the sense that a school could occupy your time and present you with certain sorts of content, but all sorts of information is freely available for whoever wants to learn about it. So I would say that schools are neither responsible for teaching people like a lot of certain other subjects, so we shouldn't say that they're holding kids back, something like that. I don't think that that's fair to say. You don't want to put more responsibility on the institutions that they have. How far somebody goes in mathematics nowadays, I would often say, has to do with economic factors. So could the person afford to spend the time and the energy to do that? Coupled with a willingness or a desire to do that. But, there's no, it's not like, oh no, the school didn't offer this class, so I can't do it. And I'll just speak from experience. Like, I became interested in studying a bunch of languages, and I didn't just say, for example, oh yeah, the school, they don't offer Korean class, so I could not learn Korean. Like, that's not true at all. You could go, as Reaper was saying, with the cooking on YouTube and all this. Well, like in most schools nowadays, they don't teach home economics, I think. Now, is that stopping anybody from teaching cooking? Probably most of the people I know that are interested in cooking, food, that sort of stuff, they might not even come from families that have very long or established cooking traditions. In fact, they might say, there was never any good food at my house, so I taught myself how to cook so that I could enjoy good food and share it with my friends. I think a lot of people that learn how to cook, their motivation is they had to teach themselves because they weren't given something. And as we're speaking positively about the internet and a lot of stuff now, there's so much freely available information for so many things. So I think, yes, it's not a good idea to say, oh yes, the school preventing people from learning more math. Likewise, I'm not going to say the schools prevent people from learning how to cook because they don't have home economics classes. Rather, positively looking forward, seeing how stuff works, how people actually learn things, then we could ask questions like, what do we think is the role of school? How should we restructure school? For example, should it be so long? Should it start so early? And so on and so forth. And through that, right, if you're able to see what your goals are, what you think is the sort of life that you would want, like yourself, if you went back in your childhood, ask this question, like, what sort of childhood would I want myself to have? How could I give the next generation, how could I give somebody else a better childhood than I had? If I could give myself the ideal sort of childhood, including education stuff, what would it look like? I think a mindset like that is a good better starting place, at least, to think about what education should look like. And I'm using education more broadly than just formal education. Education could mean, free time to explore at libraries or self-directed projects. It could mean all sorts of stuff. Okay. All right, so I think that about does it, covering these topics. As a person who has researched and studied and taught myself all sorts of stuff, the topic of education has long been interesting to me. Also, too, because the nature of a lot of the things I have studied, like you go into, reading, research, stuff like that, then oftentimes the sort of jobs that you would expect going down the pipeline would be in some form or another education-related topics. So the topic of education and learning broadly continues to interest me, and I needed to quickly throw together a topic to try out this new streaming time. So I just decided to comment on this one particular video from a billionaire philanthropist of our day. And I hope this video was educational. Thank you all that joined today. I think that about does it for our stream. And of course, like, subscribe, do all the YouTube stuff, and feel free to leave your comments if there's anything that you would like me to cover or look at in the future. Thank you.